Welcome everyone to another episode of the Lorepod podcast. I'm your host Dakota Morgan, coming to you from Phoenix, Arizona. Today we're going back to Star Wars because we're talking about a truly underrated group of characters hailing all the way from Star Wars Battlefront 2, not the OG one we all played on PS2 and Xbox 360 and all that jazz, but the newer one that came out just a couple of years ago, and the one that helped to break the internet and their servers when everyone started replaying it after Andor. Yes, that Battlefront 2. The campaign mode, highly underrated, is also in canon. Back in the day on the old Comic Chronicle podcast, I actually interviewed the guy who played Shriv on that one, Dan Donahue. Truly amazing guy. But today we're not going to be talking about the Rebels, kind of, but we're actually going to be talking about Inferno Squad, a special forces group from that game where you play as Iden Versio, the commander of Inferno Squad during the game, and have a whole lot of events happen and shit too. But there is some books that were out from these characters, as well as much more lore in there, and we're going to be talking about the characters themselves and the lore and the story of Inferno Squad. The members include Commander Iden Versio, Gideon Hazak, a soldier and a pilot, Serena Morana, a cryptologist and a spy, ISB, and Del Miko, who is also a soldier and a spy. Now, these four soldiers, though, did actually wear specialized clothing, uniforms, and tech compared to other troopers like a stormtrooper, a mud trooper, a shore trooper, all this stuff like that, or a TIE fighter pilot. They were specialized in their gear and their symbols as well. They had more cloth uniform while wearing different sections of armor, even a life support unit as well. They were dressed in all black with some red stripes and, of course, the red Inferno Squad logo. And they did sport a TIE fighter helmet. They did have some TIE fighter pilot tech, though, in their uniform in order to make it easier for them to switch from ship to out of ship combat, and then also to just grab any ship, any TIE fighter, and be able to roll in. But also to be able to become extremely fast and be able to move around fast, to say the least, there in high combat scenarios. There was even a device in their helmet that was able to identify changes in gravity fields, which was the way you're actually able to spot someone who's cloaked in the Star Wars universe. Like, they're that badass. You have a life support unit, you have you have pilot mechanics in there, you have combat armor, you have all this stuff in there. And Commander Versio actually had a droid that is one of these smaller seeker droids, and was able to, and it had specialized tasers, hacking devices, and whatnot, and they would use it to sneak into areas, infiltrate, open doors, attack people they need to, or kill them, really, whatever they needed. It was a little bit modified as well. They also had a modified cruiser called the Corvus, which kind of looks similar to it was a medium-sized ship, and it looked like you combined a Star Destroyer and TIE Fighter together. And it did have its own crew as well. That's a little bit of the people and their tech and stuff like that too. But let's get into the history of them, shall we? Because Inferno Squad is actually the four soldiers there, the ones we just mentioned. Those are the only four members of Inferno Squad. Now, these four soldiers were already people in the Empire and well established also, of course, Iden having her dad be the now Admiral in the Empire. But they were then recruited for Inferno Squad, and their missions were to infiltrate, go behind enemy lines, gather information, assassinate, sabotage, all the likes like that. They also had the authority to actually step outside the Imperial command and do what the hell they needed to do, and then sometimes report to Garrett Versio, the Admiral, which of course, Iden's dad. And sometimes they actually went on single missions as well to help out with their overall goals that they were having for Orders of the Empire. Now, big thing being, though, they actually didn't get formed until after the destruction of the first Death Star, which Iden Versio was a pilot around, and she was one of the few people to actually, like a handful of people, to make it off the station. A couple 100,000 soldiers were on that, and crew members and all that were on the Death Star. So when it exploded, it definitely hit a dent in there with them. But the four were recruited by the Admiral Versio, Iden's dad, and were actually recruited and, over time, proved themselves worthy of being an Inferno. Now, they even were before the Battle of Endor, which really set off a huge event and where you meet up with Inferno Squad. Before the Battle of Endor, though, they were sent in to go undercover and try to take out the Dreamers, some of Saul Guerrera's remaining people. Because at this point, after the destruction for Death Star and such, Saul is dead, thanks Rogue One movie. And then, of course, there's some leftover remnants of his extremist type of rebels. Well, they were sent in undercover to go deal with that, and Saint Morana was actually one of the only members to be killed, and she sacrificed herself for the mission. leaving just the 3 Inferno squad. They never replaced her. Now, by the time we catch up with them, though, in the Battle of Endor, they have been reduced to the support. They're not really doing that much of assault, well, a sabotage, sneaking around and shit like that either. Most of their missions included giving support to troops on the ground, which they did during the Battle of Endor. Giving support to the stormtroopers, who were very shocked to see him. As fuck, I would be too. All of a sudden, these black Spec Ops guys show up out of nowhere, like, what? And you're not Death Troopers? What's going on here? We were versing teddy bears in space Vietnam. Now, during the Battle of Endor, though, they, of course, looked up and saw the explosion of the Death Star Part 2, which that's going to put a fucking dent in when you see 2 Death Stars explode. Now, after this whole event here, too, they had to meet up with the Admiral, and, well, this is where Operation Cinder, and some of you Mandalorian people might remember that from one of the seasons, and it actually stemmed from this game that came out before that Mandalorian season, 2 or 3, I think it was. Now, an Emperor Palpatine robot who showed his face in like this weird cloaked robe thing and then sounded like this. It was scary as hell, of course, set it out for Operation Cinder. And this is, of course, afterwards where the Inferno squad actually had to go in and help all the troopers and remaining people escape from Endor, though. It wasn't a clean escape. So before all this, Endor was a battle zone. It was a whole shit show. So the Inferno squad helped get the remaining people out of there, get their ship, and get the remaining Imperial people that they could out of the wreckage of the second Death Star. With Operation Cinder then in tow, they're being told it is the fallback plan for the Empire to still show that they are in charge and that the galaxy will still fear them and then still go to rally to their side. Which, okay. Good luck. First part of the mission, they were sent to help out a Star Destroyer, the Dauntless, in shipyards above a planet. And those shipyards actually were important because the Dauntless, that Star Destroyer, were carrying satellite arrays. And those satellite arrays were critical to Operation Cinder. So our good Inferno squad went out into a space battle, and it was a heavy space battle. Many rebel ships were sent in, probably because they had intel that this was a bad thing that was going down. Now, they are also sent to the planet of Vardos. And Vardos was a Imperial planet. Not really much nature on there, more just industrial and everything like that. And it was heavy, heavy, heavy to the Empire. Loyalists everywhere, millions of troops on the ground, civilians dedicated to the cause, and it looked very Nazi-esque. It looked very 1940s there when you go through that mission. You're like, oh, Jesus. But satellites that they rescued there after they defended the station and got the Star Destroyer out of there, the Inferno squad came down to Vardos for their mission and saw that the satellite dishes were all around and they were activated, shooting beams of energy into the planet. Thousands, or probably a couple hundred of them. And it's terraforming the planet. And it's going to kill everybody down there. And they're like, this is part of it. And like, mission is to go down there and get Headmaster Gleb. Non-humanoid species, her. And Headmaster Gleb was actually the one who helped train Iden and whatnot, too, in the ways of the Empire. She's basically like the evil headmistress lady who's going to be like training people of the Empire and making sure they have no fucking souls when they're kids. Yeah, that's basically their job. And Iden wasn't really big on the killing everybody in Vardos, even their own troops down there as well. And all they were sent down there to do, not evacuate or anything, but to just get fucking Gleb. This actually led to a fight. See the destruction of what the Empire is actually capable of to its own fucking people at this point, not just rebels and rebel planets. Iden and Del actually betray Hask, and he stays behind with the Empire, but then they are saying, fuck you, we're done. And tried it there. Of course, the Empire's like, no, screw you, we're going to kill you because you know way too much. And so then there's an ensuing battle, and they actually do escape because they couldn't deal with what they were doing. And this left Hask actually as the only member left of Inferno Squad. Now, as you can imagine, Iden Del did actually join the Rebel Alliance. It wasn't easy, it took time, and it definitely took a little bit of roughing around the edges for them, but eventually they came around. And they were a very great squad. It was kind of their own version of Inferno for the rebels, who probably appreciated the support. And then their gear and stuff like that as well were actually a mixture of Empire and Rebel, making them pretty badass. And of course they took the ship as well. You're going to take the Corvus. They actually were underneath the leader of Shriv, who again I mentioned earlier. Now, they actually met a few characters. They went on solo missions while doing combo missions as well. They actually even helped on Naboo. They helped Princess Leia out. They helped Chewie and Han, helped free Wookiee slaves. Even Del meeting Luke Skywalker in a whole Imperial superhero kind of thing where we question his faith as a guy who grew up on Coruscant being told the Jedi were bad. Now Hask, though, of course, was surviving in the Empire, and it was a whole battle thing with them. Never died. I think he's still around. Yeah. But we do find him later on, though, at the end, in a kind of an extra DLC thing where we see them 20, 30 years after the events of the game. Iden and Del do have a child, and of course they fall in love. You know, why not? And then Hask is an old man, but he joined up with the First Order. Because why not? That being said, though, that is going to be Inferno Squad. And a little bit of the history to a little bit of where we're at now. I won't go too much further into there because there is that extended lore that I was starting to mention after First Order and things. But that could be saved for a different episode and different lore talk. I've been your host, Dakota Morgan. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode about Inferno Squad and Star Wars. And you learned a little bit of something. Be sure to subscribe for new episodes every week. My social media is going to be down in the description box below. Twitch, X, and Instagram. And of course, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to the show, everybody. And leave a review. It helps us out greatly because I've been doing the podcast game for almost 10 years and fucking hell, there's so many now. Thanks, everybody. You all rock. And remember, stay creative.